"There is a deposition," I said, "lodged with the elders in the first week of the sealing, and it has been sitting in that archive for 10 years, because the law says a sealed man's testimony cannot be opened until his seal breaks. His seal broke this morning. I am asking this hall to open it. 400 people, and my own mother somewhere among them. I want to be honest about what I was doing, because everyone since has decided it was courage, and it was the opposite of courage. It was the thing you do when you have run out of ways to keep not knowing. I had spent 10 years writing letters to a monster. I had a fairly good idea by then of what was in that deposition, and I knew that the moment it was read aloud, my father would stop being a man who was murdered and become something else in front of everyone who had ever pitied me for him. The regent said, very reasonably, that there was no need to distress the family of the dead. "The family of the dead is standing in front of you," I said. "And she is asking, 10 years earlier, I had walked to the base of a sealed tower with a letter in my hand, and absolutely no intention of being kind. My name is Alma, and for 10 years, I carried letters to a man I hated. I was 17 when the Red Winter happened, and 27 when the tower opened, and I would like to do this in order, because the order is the whole of it. I was a runner at Stormcrag. That is a real post and a lowly one. You carry things about a keep, writs and orders and packets, all day, on your feet, for very little. And I got it at 15 because my father was a keep man and my mother did the linens, and it was the kind of small ordinary life that 400 people at Stormcrag were living at the same time. Then the Red Winter. I will tell it the way I was told it, because that is the way I believed it for 10 years. On a night in the second week of the year, King Osric of Stormcrag lost hold of his wolf. It happens. It is the terror at the bottom of every alpha's life, and it had never once happened to him. And that night it did. He went through the lower keep as the wolf, and when it was over, there were 11 people dead, and one of them was my father. The territory did not put him down. That is the thing outsiders never understand about the North. We do not destroy an alpha for the wolf, because the wolf is not a separate crime. It is the price of having alphas at all. What we do is older and colder. We seal them. 10 years. In the tower on the palace grounds, alone, with the door mortared shut and a hatch at the base for what the law allows. He remains king in name because a sealed man is not deposed, he is suspended. His cousin held the regency, and the writs still went to the tower to be sealed with the king's own seal, because that is how the law is written, and the law does not much care about convenience. And here is the part that matters. The heart of the sealing, the whole point of the penance, is not the loneliness. It is that the sealed man may not answer. Not, cannot, may not. He is permitted to receive every letter, every writ, every word anyone cares to push through that hatch, and he is forbidden, on pain of the thing they did not do to him at the start, to send one word back. 10 years of being spoken to and not being allowed to speak. That is the punishment. Our grandmothers designed it, and they knew exactly what they were doing. I found all of that out in the month after my father was buried, and I found out one more thing, which is that the tower's official correspondence was carried by a runner, and that no runner at Stormcrag would go near it. So I asked for the post. I was 17, and I asked for the worst job in that keep, and they were so glad to be rid of it that nobody asked me why. I did not take it out of kindness. I want that understood before anything else in this account. I took it because I wanted to stand at the bottom of that tower every week and know he was in there. I wrote the first letter in my 3rd week. It was not a nice letter. I have it in front of me as I tell you this, because he kept it, which is a thing I will come to. It is 4 pages long, and it is in the handwriting of a 17-year-old girl, pressing so hard that the pen went through in places, and it tells the King of Stormcrag exactly what he took, in detail, with names, my father's name, and what he was like, and what my mother's face did when they came to the door, and what it is to be 17, and suddenly the one who has to manage the linens. The last line of it says, "I hope you read this. I hope you read every one of them. They will not let you answer, and I am glad, because there is nothing you could say." I pushed it through the hatch under a bundle of Crown writs, and I walked back across the grounds, and I felt better than I had felt in 3 weeks. So I did it again, the next week, and the next. I want to describe how a thing like that changes, because it did not change all at once, and I could not tell you the week it turned. The first year is rage, all of it, 50-odd letters, and every one of them is a fist. I told him about the funeral. I told him about my mother selling my father's tools. I told him the exact number of days it had been. There is one in the 9th month that is a single line. Are you still alive in there? I need you to be. The second year is duller and worse. Rage is exhausting, and grief is not. Grief just sits. And the second year of letters is a girl of 18 telling a locked door about her Tuesday, because there is no one else in the world she's allowed to be that bored with. I told him the keep gossip. I told him a laundry maid had called me strange. I told him I had started reading, properly, because a runner has a great deal of waiting in her day. And somewhere in the 3rd year, I stopped writing to a monster and started writing to a reader, and I did not notice it happening. And it is the single most important thing that ever happened to me. Because he could not answer. That is the thing. There is no correspondence in the world as honest as one, where the other party is legally forbidden to reply. I never once had to manage his reaction. I never had to be interesting. I told that tower things I have never told a living soul. That I did not miss my father as much as I performed missing him. And it frightened me. That I had begun to be frightened I would be a runner at 50. That I did not want to marry the man my mother had picked, and could not say why. That some weeks I only wrote the letter so that I would have said something true out loud that week. 10 years, 521 letters. I numbered them from about the 2nd year, because I am a runner and I count things. I stopped hating him in the 5th year, and I did not tell him so, which I have since learned he noticed, because the letters simply stopped mentioning it, and a man with nothing to do but read notices, a silence. And I want to be very clear, because people ask, I did not think he was reading them. Not really. The hatch took the writs, and the writs came back sealed, so I knew a hand was there. But 500 pages of a runner's Tuesdays. I assumed they went in the fire. I assumed I was doing a thing for me, the way you tend a grave for you. That assumption was load-bearing. I could not have written a word of it if I had genuinely believed a man was on the other side reading. The tower opened on the 2nd Tuesday of the year, 10 years to the day. I was not there for the ceremony. I want that in, because everyone assumes I was. There was a whole business of it. The elders, the regent, the mortar broken out by a mason at dawn, the formal reading of the term, and a runner is not invited to that. I was told at breakfast, like everyone else, that the seal was broken, and the king of Stormcrag had walked out of the tower on his own feet and been taken to the elders for the testing. I did my rounds. I did not go near the grounds. I did not have the first idea what to do with myself. 10 years of a habit, and the man I had been writing to was loose in the same building as me, and I understood for the first time with my whole body exactly how much I had said. He found me at the base of the tower that evening, because of course he did. I had gone there without deciding to, the way you go to a place at the time you always go. I had never seen his face. I want you to understand that 10 years and I had never once seen the man. Only a hatch, and a hand sometimes, and the sound of feet on stone. He was standing at the foot of the tower in the last of the light, and he was thin the way 10 years indoors makes a man thin, and he had a great deal of grey in his hair for a man of 36. And he was looking at me the way you look at a place you have been told about all your life and are finally standing in. Number 411, he said. I did not say anything. I could not. You wrote that you had begun to be frightened you would still be a runner at 50, and that you had never said it to anyone, and that you were only telling me because I could not tell anybody. He said it very carefully, like a man handling something. You were 24. It was the spring. You had been ill the week before, and you apologized for the handwriting. You read them. I read all of them, said the King of Stormcrag. 521. In order. Most of them more times than that. I have had 10 years, and there was nothing else in that room. And I did the only thing available to me, which was to be sick with humiliation in front of an Alpha King, and then to say, you weren't supposed to read them. You weren't supposed to. I hated you. The first one, number 1, he said. I hope you read this. I hope you read every one of them. They will not let you answer, and I am glad, because there is nothing you could say. He was very still. I have known that line by heart for 10 years. It is the truest thing anyone has ever written to me, and I have wanted to answer it since the 3rd week, and I could not, and I have spent a decade composing a reply I was forbidden to send. You knew about the pear tree, I said. It came out of me sideways, the way the stupid things do when the enormous ones will not fit. The one in the lower court. I wrote about it in, I don't know, the 6th year. It came down in a storm, and I was upset about it, and I couldn't tell anyone, because it is a tree, and I was 23, and my father was dead, and I was crying about a tree. Number 294, said Osric. You said you had not cried at the funeral, and you cried at a pear tree, and you thought that meant something was wrong with you. He said it gently. It does not mean that. It means grief comes out sideways and picks its own door. I wrote you 4 pages about it. I could not send them. I have thought about that tree more than I have thought about almost anything, because for a year afterward you mentioned the gap where it was, in about 1 letter in 5, without ever once saying you were doing it. I had to sit down on the tower step, because that is the thing nobody understands about being read. It was not the frightening letters, the ones where I said the true, ugly, unmanageable things. I had half expected those to be known. It was the pear tree. It was 1 line in 5 letters about a gap in a courtyard, noticed and counted and held for 4 years by a man in a stone room. And it meant that somebody in this world had been paying the kind of attention to my life that I had never once paid to it myself. Then say it. I said, the answer. Whatever it is, say it now. And Osric of Stormcrag said, not tonight, because the answer to letter number 1 is not about me. It is about your father, and I will not hand it to you standing in the dark at the bottom of a tower after a day like this one. Ask me again when you have slept. Ask me twice, if you can bear to. I have waited 10 years. I can wait a week, and you should have the chance to decide whether you want it at all. I did not know yet that there was an answer to letter number 1, or that a man had spent 10 years in a stone room holding it. If you want to find out what a runner discovers in her own delivery register, and what it costs to open a thing you already suspect will take your father away from you a second time, stay with me. What was lodged with the elders in the 1st week of the sealing is the reason I am telling you any of this. I asked him again 4 days later. He made me ask twice, exactly as he had said, which I resented at the time and have been grateful for ever since. And he told me that my father had not been killed in his home. That was all, at first. 1 fact, laid down carefully, and I did not understand why he was starting there. He was found in the lower keep, I said, in the West Passage. Everyone knows where he was found. Yes, he was found in the West Passage, 40 feet from my own door, at the 2nd hour of the morning with 10 other men. Osric's hands were very still on the table. Alma, what was a keep porter doing in the West Passage at 2 in the morning? I did not have an answer. I had never once asked the question. That is the thing about a story you are given when you are 17 and destroyed. You do not interrogate it, you hold on to it, because it is the only shape your loss has. I am not going to tell you the rest until you have looked yourself, he said. You will not believe it from me, and you should not. I am the man with every reason to say it. Go and look, and then come back, and I will answer anything you ask. So I went and looked, and because I am a runner, I knew exactly where to look, and it took me 2 days. Every keep has a register. Ours is kept by the door warden of each post. What came, what went, who carried it. And I had been filling in the tower's register, in my own hand every week for 10 years, without ever once reading backward past my own entries. I read the first year, the year before mine. And in the second week of the sealing, in old Berthold's cramped hand, there was an entry that stopped my heart. Wrecked from within. Sealed deposition 1, under King's hand and seal. Conveyed to the Elders' Archive per statute, not to be opened before the breaking of the seal. He had made a statement. In the first week, before the mortar was dry, and it had been sitting in that archive for 10 years, legally unopenable, because the law that forbids a sealed man to speak also forbids anyone to hear him, and a deposition from inside the tower cannot be entered into evidence until the term ends. 10 years. And on the morning the door opened, that document had become admissible, and not one person in Stormcrag had remembered it existed, because the only 2 people who knew were an old warden nobody spoke to, and a man nobody was allowed to answer. Something in me went very still and very clear. I sat in that record room with the register open and did the arithmetic I had spent 10 years refusing to do. My father was a porter. We were not poor after the Red Winter. I had never once thought about that, and I thought about it now, sitting on the floor of an archive. My mother sold his tools in the 2nd month, and I remembered it as poverty. And I remembered, underneath it, that she had not needed to, that there had been money in the house that autumn that had never been there before, and that when I asked about it at 17, she told me it was nothing, and I never asked again, because I was 17 and my father was dead. 11 men in the West Passage, at 2 in the morning, 40 feet from the King's own door. I went to my mother that night. I did not go to Osric, and I did not go to the elders. I went to Bettine, in the room where I grew up, and I asked her what my father had been doing in the West Passage. And my mother, who had held it for 10 years, who had let her daughter carry hate letters to a tower every week for a decade rather than say it, put her hands over her face. They came in the autumn, she said. 3 of them. They said the king was going to be replaced, that it was already decided, that better men had decided it, and that they needed the doors. Just the doors, Alma. Your father had the keys to the lower keep. She was not crying. It was worse than crying. He said no for a month, and then there was money on the table. And he said yes, and I let him. And I have let you write those letters for 10 years, because the day I told you the truth was the day you found out your father was... She could not finish it. I sat in my mother's kitchen and understood the whole of it at once. 11 men had gone into the West Passage at 2 in the morning to kill a sleeping king. My father had opened the doors for them. And a man who woke to find 11 armed men inside his own chamber had done what an alpha does, and it had gone the way it goes when a wolf is woken into a killing. Badly, entirely. All 11. And by the morning there were 11 dead men and 1 king with blood on him, and no witnesses at all, except the survivors of the plot, who had every reason in the world to run into the keep, shouting that the king's wolf had gone mad. And it had worked, because it is the easiest thing in the north to believe. Every soul in that territory carries the fear that an alpha will lose hold of his wolf. You do not have to persuade anyone of it. You only have to say it first. And, loudly, 11 dead men became 11 murdered innocents in about 4 hours, and the houses behind it took the regency, and the King of Stormcrag was sealed in a tower for a decade for defending his own life, in his own bedroom. He could have said so. That is the part I could not hold. In the first week he made a deposition naming every one of them. And then he took the sealing anyway. I asked him why. I was not gentle about it. Because the deposition names 11 dead men and 4 living houses, Osric said. In the first week I could have fought it, and it would have been my word against 4 houses with 11 corpses on the floor, and a territory that had already decided, and it would have been a war, a real one, in the year after a bad harvest over whether the king's wolf was mad. I sat in that tower and did the arithmetic every night for a month. He looked at his own hands. 10 years is a long time. It is not as long as a war, and the deposition would keep. You let an entire territory believe you murdered 11 people. Yes, you let me believe it. My voice was not steady. For 10 years, you read 500 letters from a girl who told you what you'd taken from her, and you knew, every week, for 10 years, you knew what her father actually was, and you did not. I could not answer, said Osric of Stormcrag, and for the first time his voice went. Alma, I was forbidden to send one word. Do you understand what those letters were? For 10 years, the only human voice in my life belonged to a woman who was in agony because of a lie I was legally unable to correct, and I read every one of them, and I could not tell her, and I could not stop her, and I could not even ask her to stop writing. He stopped. I have wanted one thing for a decade. Not the throne, not the sun. I wanted to be allowed to answer letter number 1. That is the whole of what I have wanted, and I have had 4 days of being able to, and I have been too frightened to do it, because the answer takes your father away from you, and I have spent 10 years being the only person alive who knew how much you loved him. I did not speak to him for 6 days. That is the honest middle of this, and I will not tidy it. I did not fall into his arms in an archive. I went away and was angry, at him for the silence, at my mother for 10 years of it, at my father most of all, and at myself for the 500 letters, every single one of which now meant something different from the thing I had meant when I wrote it. And on the 7th day I went to the elders and asked for the deposition to be opened, because Lord Orail, the regent, the king's own cousin, who had held Stormcrag for 10 years and had been one of the 4 houses, was not going to let a released king sit down and start asking questions. He had already begun. It was very well done. A quiet, sorrowful, entirely reasonable petition that the king's fitness be examined before he resumed, citing the Red Winter, citing 10 years of a wolf nobody had tested, citing the plain fact that no man comes out of a stone room after a decade the same as he went in. He did not accuse Osric of anything. He simply asked whether the territory could risk it. And half those elders were ready to agree, because it is the easiest fear in the north to reach for, and Orail had reached for it once before, and it had worked beautifully. And the only thing that could stop it was a document that nobody but a runner and an old warden knew existed. So I stood up in that hall in front of 400 people, with my mother somewhere among them, and asked for the one thing that would destroy my father's name in public and clear the man I had spent 10 years hating. There is a deposition, I said. Orail was very good. He said gently that there was no need to distress the family of the dead. He said that the runner girl had plainly been influenced. 10 years at that tower, an impressionable age. Everyone had always said she was strange, and that whatever the king had told her in 4 days of freedom could hardly be weighed against 11 bodies. He was warm about it. He was so warm that I watched the room begin to turn, the way rooms do when a kind man gives them permission to stop thinking. The family of the dead is standing in front of you, I said, and she is asking. And I have not been influenced by anything except the register in my own handwriting, which is in the record room where it has been for 10 years, and which any of you may go and read. The deposition was lodged in the first week of the sealing, under the king's own seal, by a man who could not have known what the last 10 years would look like. It cannot have been written to serve today. It is the only piece of evidence in this whole affair that could not possibly have been arranged, and it has been sitting in your own archive the entire time, and not one of you remembered it. The elders opened it that afternoon. It named 11 dead men and 4 living houses. It named my father, third on the list, and it described what he had opened, and what he had been paid, and it was read aloud in that hall in a clerk's flat voice, while I stood there and let 400 people find out what I had found out in my mother's kitchen. Aurel did not confess, and he did not run. He argued for 3 days that a deposition written by a man in his own defence proves nothing, and he was right, that it proves nothing on its own. What finished him was the 4 houses, because a deposition that names 4 houses gives 3 of them a reason to be the first to speak, and the second, one broke on the 3rd day, and after that it went quickly. He was stripped and exiled, and his line lost the regency for good, and I did not go and watch, because by then I had understood that none of it gave me anything back. Here is my cost, plainly. My father is a traitor now, in the record, in the histories, in the mouths of people at Stormcrag, who used to say his name kindly to me because I was the girl whose father was murdered. That was mine, and I spent it. I stood up in a hall and turned my own father from a victim into a man who took money to open a door, and I did it on purpose, knowing exactly what it would do, and I have never once regretted it, and it has never once stopped hurting. And my mother would not speak to me for 11 months. That was the worst of it. She was not wrong to be angry. I had made public the thing she had spent a decade carrying, so that I would not have to. And it took a year, and a great deal of very slow work, and we are careful with each other now, in a way we were not before. She lives at Stormcrag still. She and Osric have a sort of arrangement of enormous mutual courtesy that I have decided not to examine too closely. Osric was restored in the spring, tested and confirmed, and the first act of his restored reign was to end the sealing. Not for himself, for everyone after him. He brought it before the elders, and had it struck out of the law entirely, and the argument he made was the only time I have ever seen that man angry in public. It is not a mercy, he said. We tell ourselves it is mercy because the alternative is killing him, and so for 1,000 years we have congratulated ourselves on our restraint. It is not restraint. You may hear him, and he may not answer. You may accuse, and he may not reply. 10 years of a man being spoken to and forbidden to speak. We did not invent that to be merciful. We invented it because it is the cruelest thing that can be done to a creature that talks, and I have had a decade to find the bottom of it, and I am telling you, there is no bottom. He put his hands on the table, and it nearly cost this territory its king, because a law that forbids a man to answer is a law that guarantees the liar wins. They struck it out. There has not been a sealing in Stormcrag since. He answered letter number 1 that summer, in the end, and he did it the way he did everything, which was slowly and with far too much thought. He gave it back to me first. The actual letter, 4 pages, pressed through in places, 10 years old, kept flat and dry and in order, with 520 others in a box he had carried out of that tower himself, and let no one else touch. And clipped to it was his reply, written in the 3rd week of the sealing, 10 years before, and never sent. I am not going to tell you what it says. That one is mine, and I have earned the right to keep exactly one thing out of this account. What I will tell you is that at the bottom, under the 10-year-old ink, he had added 1 new line that morning, and it said, "You were wrong about only one thing." There was something I could say. It simply took me a decade to be allowed to. I kissed him first, at the base of the tower, at the hour I had always gone. It was brief, and it was warm. and it settled something in me that had been braced since I was 17 years old, and decided that hating a locked door was better than having nowhere to put it. 3 years on, the tower is open. That was mine. I asked for it, and I asked badly and at length and repeatedly, and I got it. The door stands open, and the mortar is gone, and it is a room in a keep like any other, and there is a bench in it, and any soul at Stormcrag may go and sit in it. Some do. It is a strange thing to watch, people going up to sit for an hour in the room where the king was sealed, and coming down, quieter. I am the keeper of the register now, which is a post that did not exist, and which I invented and then had to argue for. And what it means is that every locked or restricted place at Stormcrag has a record, kept by one person whose entire job is that nothing may be put somewhere and forgotten. 10 years in a deposition in an archive taught me exactly how much can be lost by simply being filed correctly. I still write to him. That is the part everyone finds funniest, and I find least funny, weekly on the same day, because 10 years is a habit, and I am not built to break one. And he writes back now, which took some getting used to, and which I complained about bitterly for about a year, because a correspondence in which the other person answers is a great deal more work and considerably less honest, and I have had to learn how to do it, like everybody else. The letters are in the box, all 521, and the new ones after them, and he still keeps them in order. And Berthold, who is 80, and who kept a register nobody read for 10 years, and whose careful hand is the reason a king has a throne, has been given a chair at the elders' table for the rest of his life, which he says is a great nuisance, and which he has not missed once. I still wonder about my father, honestly, more than I wonder about Auril. Auril wanted a regency and did a monstrous thing, and there is no mystery in a man like that. But my father said no for a month. That is the detail my mother gave me that I cannot put down. A month of saying no, and then money on a table, and a man with a daughter and a wife and a set of keys, deciding that this once, for us, he would open a door and go home. I have spent 3 years trying to work out whether he thought anyone would die. Tell me in the comments what you think, whether a man who opens a door for armed men at 2 a.m. tells himself he does not know what he is doing. I have never been able to decide, and I loved him, and both of those things are still true. Comment, letter 1, if you want to hear what Osric's wolf did the first time I brought the whole box of letters into the keep to be properly shelved. And, if you want more nights like this, 1, a king forbidden by law to answer, a girl who wrote 500 letters to a door, and a deposition that sat in an archive for 10 years because nobody was allowed to hear it. Stay close. There is more of Stormcrag left to tell. Where are you listening from tonight? I would love to know.